A hush fell over the New York courtroom as the tall, immaculately dressed brunette stepped forward, eyes blazing with fury. Everyone turned to witness the unthinkable in one swift motion. The mistress raised a trembling hand and slapped the pregnant wife across the face. Gasps ricocheted off the paneled walls. The millionaire seated at the defense table in an Italian suit worth thousands shot to his feet. His outstretched arm pointed directly at the mistress, a single startling command on his lips. Little did anyone know this moment would unleash the avalanche of shocking secrets that would change every life in that room forever. James Harrington was a man used to having the world at his fingertips. The son of an influential shipping tycoon, he inherited a sprawling empire that transported goods across continents. At 36, James had lived a privileged life filled with black-tie galas, transatlantic flights in private jets, and influential circles where everyone seemed to know his name. Yet beneath the surface of his meticulously polished shoes lay a restlessness that not even colossal wealth could quell. Lucy Harrington née Miller was James's wife. She had grown up modestly in a small town called Roslyn Heights, surrounded by rolling hills and quiet streams. Her mother, Catherine Miller, was a retired school teacher who had single-handedly raised Lucy to be kind, polite, and resourceful. When Lucy first met James at a local charity banquet, where she volunteered serving hors d'oeuvres to the wealthy donors, he was instantly captivated by her gentleness and the contrast of her simple life to his extravagant one. Over the course of that night, Lucy found the courage to share her dreams of building her own interior design brand one day. He found her dreams touching, and she found his self-confidence magnetic. Within months, they were dating, albeit in secret at first, because James's socialite circle frowned upon anything unorthodox. A year later, with Catherine Miller's blessing, James proposed to Lucy in a candlelit restaurant overlooking the Hudson River. For a moment, Lucy couldn't speak. She was overwhelmed with love, feeling like a modern Cinderella, invited into a gilded existence. The wedding that followed was lavish. Celebrities mingled with shipping magnates. CNN's cameras captured Lucy's luminous smile, and tabloids labeled them America's fairy tale couple. But not all storybooks end with happily ever after. Under the polished exterior of lavish parties, philanthropic events, and her newly formed interior design consultancy, Lucy felt a creeping sense of unease. James was often away, traveling to Monaco, Shanghai, and Dubai for high-stakes meetings. Even when home, he was caught up in endless calls with corporate attorneys, shipping brokers, and potential new investors. Their once intimate dinners turned into quick bites. The open affection they once shared morphed into polite small talk. Lucy found herself craving not only her husband's attention, but also a genuine sense of belonging in his swirling high-octane life. And then Lucy discovered she was pregnant. She was overjoyed. At long last, a new chapter of closeness might dawn in their marriage. For a while, there was indeed a sparkle in James's eyes when she told him. He embraced her so tightly that night that she found it difficult to breathe, but she never wanted him to let go. In the days and weeks that followed, though, Lucy started noticing strange phone calls and hushed texts on James's phone. He grew distant again, even more than before. Late business dinners and cancelled weekend getaways became the norm. The rumors trickled in gradually. Close friends, neighbors, and even a cousin in Manhattan tried to warn Lucy that James might be having an affair, but she refused to believe it. He was James Harrington, the man who overcame his family's snobbery to marry a girl from Roslyn Heights, the man who championed her design business with unwavering support. Why would he betray her? Yet her gut told her otherwise. One night, while James was in the shower, Lucy saw a text that flickered across his phone's screen. It was from someone named Delilah. The message read, "I miss you. Please don't keep me waiting." Lucy's heart sank. That was the moment she realized her fairy tale marriage had a crack, maybe more than one. Fear gnawed at her, and an unmistakable sense of foreboding warned her life was about to unravel in ways she never could have imagined. She clenched her stomach, her unborn child's future at stake, and decided she would dig deeper into James's secrets. Little did she know her pursuit of the truth would lead them all into a courtroom drama that would grip the entire city, culminating in an explosive confrontation no one would ever forget. The rumors about a mysterious Delilah Moore intensified. A few weeks after Lucy first spotted that incriminating text, she received a call from her childhood friend, Janet Liu, who worked at an upscale boutique on Fifth Avenue. Janet hesitated at first, but finally confessed she had spotted James browsing through designer handbags one afternoon. Handbags that Lucy would never choose for herself. Lucy's style was understated, preferring subtle elegance over ostentatious branding. But these were flamboyant, eye-catching purses that seemed more suited to a woman who reveled in attention. With trembling fingers, Lucy scrolled through James's credit card statements the next morning, hidden in the quiet corner of the Harrington Library. She discovered expensive purchases at jewelry stores, lingerie boutiques, and lavish restaurants she had never even heard of. Restaurants she certainly hadn't visited with him. A sense of betrayal stung her eyes and seared her heart. The magnitude of these hidden transactions made it undeniable. They weren't mere gifts for business associates or clients. They revealed intimacy and elaborate planning. In her attempt to keep the marriage from unraveling, Lucy confronted James diplomatically. She picked a calm moment in their penthouse's sun-drenched sitting room. "James, I found these credit card statements," she began, her voice quivering. "Is there something we should talk about?" She wanted to give him an opportunity to explain, to make it all a misunderstanding. Instead, James turned pale. He fumbled for words, eventually weaving half-baked excuses about corporate entertainment or gifts for high-net-worth clients. But Lucy's eyes, once innocent, now saw only evasiveness and guilt. She walked away, tears glistening, pressing a protective hand to her baby bump. She could no longer sustain the fantasy that everything was fine. Determined to know more, Lucy hired a private investigator through the recommendation of Sarah Davidson, her cousin who lived in the East Village. The investigator, a discreet professional named Peter Gallagher, had been used by other society women in precarious marital situations. He promised Lucy a thorough inquiry, cautioning her, "Be prepared for whatever we uncover." Sometimes the truth is harder to bear than the doubt. Within days, Gallagher's infiltration into James's life yielded results. He snapped photos of James, standing close, intimately close to a striking brunette outside an exclusive lounge in Midtown. He also acquired old text messages that indicated emotional closeness, not just physical fling. The woman's name was Delilah Moore, a rising social media influencer. She prided herself on designer wardrobes, paparazzi photo ops, and a string of wealthy boyfriends. Yet with James, Delilah appeared to have found something different. A wealthy man with a global empire who was evidently willing to finance her whims. Lucy's shock turned to anger and then to heartbreak in a matter of seconds. Sitting in Gallagher's cramped office, she stared at the images and messages. She couldn't ignore the reality any longer. James was without question seeing another woman. But Lucy did not confront James immediately. Instead, she retreated to Catherine Miller's home in Roslyn Heights for a weekend, confiding her emotional turmoil to the mother who had raised her to be strong. Catherine, grey-haired but spirited, offered no illusions. "You have to decide what's right for you and your child. If James continues this, you'll have to protect yourself." She gently advised her own heart, aching to see her daughter in distress. So Lucy returned to the Harrington penthouse, resolute. She would consult a top Manhattan divorce attorney named Sandra Blaine. She wouldn't make hasty decisions, but she would be prepared. The unborn child's welfare, her future as a mother, was the driving force. Little did Lucy know that by taking these steps, she was igniting a chain of events that would lead to one of the most scandalous legal spectacles in recent New York memory. And at the center of it all would stand Delilah Moore, cunning, glamorous, and dangerously reckless. Delilah Moore was not merely a woman of expensive tastes. She was a master manipulator. Born and raised in a small town in Texas, she'd used her striking beauty and fierce ambition to climb the social ladder. By her mid-20s, she had reinvented herself as a Manhattan influencer with a growing online presence. Part of her social media allure came from her knack for showcasing a life of opulence, expensive gifts from admirers, exotic vacations, and endless parties in the city that never sleeps. When Delilah met James Harrington at a fundraiser in Soho, she instantly recognized him as a man of significance. There was something about his composure, his aura of confidence, like he owned not just the room, but the entire city. Delilah made it her mission to captivate him, and over the course of several months, her charm offensive paid off. She became the woman he would text at midnight after a tiresome flight, the one he'd sneak away to see for champagne brunches at hidden bistros. James, lonely, jaded, and craving excitement, found himself pulled deeper into Delilah's gravitational field. What started as an impulsive escape soon warped into a precarious entanglement. Delilah understood that Lucy Harrington existed. She saw Lucy as a meek provincial girl who had stumbled into wealth. In private conversations with her close friend and fellow influencer, Natalia West Delilah dismissed Lucy as boring, insisting she didn't have the depth or the spine to maintain a man of James's caliber. In her mind, Lucy was irrelevant, just a step on the ladder that Delilah would soon surpass. She convinced herself that James's fortunes and affections would eventually settle fully upon her. Despite James's reluctance to fully sever ties with his wife, Delilah simply believed that it was just a matter of time, especially once the child was born. But Lucy's pregnancy did gnaw at her. A child meant a tangible bond between husband and wife that could complicate Delilah's ambitions. That internal tug-of-war led Delilah to push James harder for bigger displays of commitment, expensive jewelry, a penthouse of her own grand gestures of loyalty. She posted cryptic photos online, an uncaptioned shot of her hand sporting a new diamond bracelet, or glimpses of James's silhouette to stoke rumors that she was dating someone major. She wanted the world to see that she was more than just another social climber. She wanted Lucy, if she was watching, to feel powerless against her unstoppable rise. James, meanwhile, was stuck in a moral and emotional quagmire. He knew Lucy was pure-hearted, a woman who had always believed in him. But with Delilah, he felt a rush, something that made him feel alive, reckless and unconstrained. The pregnancy complicated everything. He had nightmares about losing Lucy and his reputation. He was cognizant of the possibility that his father, Richard Harrington, might cut him off if news of the affair became public. Not to mention the unspeakable heartbreak it would cause Lucy. Caught between guilt and temptation, James tried to quietly wind down the affair. Delilah, however, refused to be discarded. She launched into emotional tirades, threatened to expose him through her massive social media platforms, and would sometimes vanish for days, only to reappear dramatically sobbing at his office. In a moment of weakness, James offered to pay her a monthly allowance to keep matters discreet. Delilah, always strategic, accepted. This only bound him tighter to her manipulations, and she continued to reel him in whenever he drifted away. Eventually, Lucy's careful steps toward a divorce and her top-notch lawyer, Sandra Blaine, came to Delilah's attention. It was a development that should have thrilled Delilah. Lucy's legal moves seemingly spelled the end of the marriage. Yet the mistress felt threatened in a new way. She feared that Lucy, by divorcing James, might secure a massive settlement that would leave Delilah with only scraps of the Harrington fortune. In short, Delilah believed she had to act boldly, possibly even sabotage Lucy to secure her position. But no one could have predicted how far she would go, or that the final battle line would be drawn in a public courtroom with the world watching and Lucy carrying James's unborn child. Lucy's next steps were methodical. She sat down with her lawyer, Sandra Blaine, in a conference room high above Manhattan's bustling streets. Floor-to-ceiling windows cast bright sunlight across polished hardwood tables. Sandra, a middle-aged woman with a reputation for defending the underdog, studied Lucy with an intensity that bordered on maternal concern. "I'm going to need every piece of evidence you have," Lucy, Sandra said, voice firm but compassionate. "Financial records, phone messages, anything indicating James's infidelity. The more we can show a clear pattern of betrayal and misconduct, the stronger we'll be." Lucy swallowed hard. The notion of building a legal case against her husband felt surreal. She had wanted a loving family, not a drawn-out court battle. Still, for her unborn child's future and for her own dignity, she knew she had to see this through. She handed Sandra a neatly organized folder of private investigator reports, credit card statements, and text transcripts. Sandra raised an eyebrow at the thoroughness. "You've done your homework," she remarked, flipping through photos of James and Delilah. Then she looked at Lucy's small baby bump and sighed. "I can't promise this will be easy." A week later, James Harrington was served with the divorce papers at his corporate headquarters. News of this embarrassing scene, a liveried process server handing over an official envelope in front of James's unsuspecting board members, spread through the corridors within minutes. It threw James into a panic. He hastened to call Lucy, begging for an in-person talk. The meeting took place at a discreet cafe near Gramercy Park. Lucy arrived alone, despite Sandra's advice to bring a witness or even the investigator for protection. James wore a dark suit tie, askew eyes bearing the weight of shame. He tried to apologize, dancing around direct admissions of guilt. But Lucy was unmoved. Too many tears had already been shed. "I never intended for it to go this far," James said, voice strained. "I just felt lost." Lucy, her eyes flashed with anger. "Lost? While I carried our child? That's what you call lost." He attempted to reach for her hand, but she pulled away. Lucy informed him that the next time they spoke would be through their respective lawyers. In the swirling Manhattan wind, with horns blaring and pedestrians brushing past, it struck James that he was on the brink of losing the one thing he never thought he'd lose: his family. As the days passed, the tension only escalated. Sandra Blaine filed a comprehensive petition for divorce, citing irreconcilable differences stemming from James's extramarital affair. At Lucy's insistence, the unborn child's interests were a focal point, child support, future care, and Lucy's rightful portion of assets. James's own attorney, Gerald Peters, an aggressive litigator known to represent billionaires, fired back with a counterclaim that attempted to limit Lucy's demands. The stage for a courtroom showdown was thus set. Unbeknownst to both Lucy and James, Delilah was busy forging her own plans. She had caught wind of the formal divorce proceedings from James himself and from the ever-churning rumor mill in her influencer circle. Delilah was both excited at the prospect of Lucy being cut off from James, yet also alarmed at the potential legal entanglements that might leave James too financially strapped or simply too resentful to maintain Delilah's lavish lifestyle. The child complicated everything. Delilah soon realized she might need a bigger ace up her sleeve to maintain her hold on James, or to wrest more resources for herself in case he tried to break free. A single summons had ignited a swirl of depositions motions and hushed consultations in lofty law firm offices. Lucy, pregnant and emotionally battered, found herself forging a steely resolve. She had no idea that Delilah, with her cunning opportunism, was already setting wheels in motion that would place them all before a judge in one of New York's most sensational cases in recent memory, and set the stage for a shocking confrontation that would leave the city's gossip columns ablaze for months to come. Meanwhile, in Delilah's penthouse suite, a plush apartment in a building partially financed by James, an entirely different drama was unfolding. Delilah paced the marble floors while Natalia West, her closest confidant, sipped champagne on a velvet sofa. The city lights framed them through floor-to-ceiling windows. This was the lifestyle Delilah refused to surrender. She had grown addicted to the glittering parties, the shopping sprees on Fifth Avenue, and the chance to rub elbows with Manhattan's elite. Now, with the Harrington divorce in motion, she stood on precarious ground. "What if James loses a fortune in this divorce?" Natalia asked, swirling the champagne in her glass. "He might have less to give you, or worse, he might give you nothing at all." Delilah turned, eyes narrowed. "I won't let that happen. I've invested too much in this relationship." "James owes me." Natalia shrugged. "He owes you nothing if he decides you're a liability. You need leverage, girl." Delilah bit her lip, considering. For weeks she had been carefully collecting her own evidence. She retained screenshots of private messages, voice recordings of intimate conversations with James, and even a few videos that painted a vivid picture of their relationship. Some were romantic, others downright scandalous, proof of the lengths James had gone to keep her happy. She knew that if Lucy's team discovered these artifacts, it might strengthen Lucy's case for adultery and financial damages. But if Delilah wielded them first, threatening to expose James in the tabloids, she might secure a substantial settlement for herself. Natalia studied Delilah's face. "So are you going to blackmail him?" she asked, setting her champagne flute aside. There was a tremor of concern in her voice, an awareness that Delilah might be going too far. Delilah laughed, though it didn't reach her eyes. "I wouldn't call it blackmail. More like negotiating from a position of strength. It's business, Natalia, he taught me that." Yet Delilah's plan extended beyond mere financial extortion. She was deeply jealous of Lucy's pregnancy. In her mind, Lucy's baby was a trump card that guaranteed Lucy a permanent place in James's life and possibly a substantial chunk of his empire. Delilah wanted to disrupt that advantage. She began to devise a scheme that involved painting Lucy as emotionally unstable, perhaps even unfit to raise a child. If she could prove Lucy was an unsteady partner, maybe the courts would view Lucy's claims less favorably. In the days that followed, Delilah fed carefully manipulated stories to gossip blogs. Lucy was rumored to have a mental breakdown. Lucy was heavily medicated. Lucy was an opportunist, playing the sympathy card. None of these rumors had concrete basis, but Delilah understood the power of media spin. If the allegations stuck even partially, Lucy's public image might be tarnished. Then James would be more inclined to rely on Delilah, or so she thought. Meanwhile, James was spiraling. He was saddled with stress from the divorce pressure, from the Harrington board of directors, to maintain the shipping empire's reputation, and relentless pleas from Delilah to keep financing her extravagant lifestyle. One afternoon, after hours of board meetings and dismal calls with attorneys, James found Delilah waiting for him in the lobby of his corporate tower. She grabbed his arm, ignoring the startled glances of employees. In a quiet corridor, she confronted him with an ultimatum. Either you stand by me, or I make public every secret you've told me. Fear stabbed at James's chest. When he tried to reason with her, Delilah leaned in, whispering with trembling lips, "I've fought too hard to get here, James. Don't think for a second I'll slip away quietly." He realized in that moment he was contending with two formidable opponents: Lucy's moral righteousness, backed by a sharp lawyer, and Delilah's ruthless cunning, fueled by her desire for influence and wealth. Juggling both had become nearly impossible, but no one could have predicted how the next series of events would escalate, climaxing in a legal hearing that would turn every eye in New York upon them. And in that very courtroom, the mistress and the pregnant wife would collide in the most shocking way imaginable. It took several weeks for the divorce case of Lucy Miller Harrington versus James Harrington to appear before a judge for preliminary proceedings. Both legal teams had filed motions, and the Honorable Jessica U. Friedman, a seasoned judge known for her no-nonsense approach, was assigned to oversee the matter in the Supreme Court of the state of New York. Court TV networks expressed interest given James's high profile, but Lucy's side tried to keep the proceedings as private as possible. Still, the tabloids were watching, and rumor had it even Oprah Winfrey's team had taken notice of the salacious saga. On the morning of the hearing, Lucy dressed in a modest black maternity dress that discreetly hugged her growing belly. She arrived at the courthouse with her mother Catherine and her attorney Sandra Blaine in tow. The corridor was swarming with reporters. Flashbulbs and shouted questions followed Lucy as she walked with her chin lifted high, refusing to give them the spectacle they craved. Her heart pounded, but she was resolute. This was for her child. James arrived minutes later, flanked by his attorney Gerald Peters and two bodyguards. His normally composed posture seemed tense, weighed down by the day's gravity. The hush that descended among onlookers as he passed was telling. They expected drama, and drama was almost certain to come. And then a final figure entered, Delilah Moore, wearing a striking designer dress with a plunging neckline and towering heels. A hush of a different kind fell over the gallery as she sauntered down the marble hallway, making no attempt to hide her presence. A wave of murmuring spread. Why was she here? Her invitation to the hearing was unnecessary, but Delilah's intentions were clear. She wanted to insert herself into the narrative, to stake her claim publicly. Inside the packed courtroom, the tension was palpable. Lucy sat on one side, James on the other, with Delilah just behind James. The attorneys took their places. Judge Friedman entered, robes flowing, and commanded the room to rise. Once everyone was seated, Friedman glanced through her notes, adjusting her reading glasses. I see we have a preliminary hearing regarding spousal support, child support, and certain injunction requests. Gerald Peters rose first to speak for James. He attempted to argue that Lucy was overreaching, requesting far more in financial compensation than was fair. He spoke in a measured tone, as if Lucy's emotional wounds were mere footnotes to a cold financial transaction. Sandra Blaine countered with unwavering logic. Lucy had a legitimate claim, given James's blatant infidelity and her reliance on his income throughout the marriage. She was also carrying his child, which necessitated further financial protection. As arguments flew back and forth, Lucy caught Delilah's gaze from across the courtroom. The mistress's eyes burned with something like triumph, as if every statement made Lucy appear smaller. The disquiet in Lucy's stomach doubled an unsettling swirl of anger and vulnerability. Judge Friedman called for a short recess to review documents. The tension in the room spilled into the hallway, where Lucy and Catherine huddled with Sandra discussing strategy. James retreated to a corner, with Gerald Peters looking fraught. Delilah, however, chose to confront Lucy directly, stepping away from James's side. "Enjoying all the pity looks you're getting." Delilah sneered at Lucy, her voice low but venomous. Lucy froze. It took every ounce of her composure not to lash out. Catherine moved protectively closer to her daughter, but Delilah shrugged off the older woman's disapproval. "It's about time James found someone more in line with his lifestyle," she hissed, voice dripping with arrogance. Lucy, fury and heartbreak mingling in her chest, simply muttered, "Have some respect. I'm carrying his child." Delilah scoffed, glancing at Lucy's baby bump. "That won't keep him tied to you forever." The tension was electric, but no one dared believe it would escalate to physical violence, at least not yet. When the bailiff announced the resumption of the hearing, everyone filed back into the courtroom. Had Lucy known the storm that was about to break, she might have asked for more than just her mother by her side. The seeds of chaos had already been sown, and in a matter of minutes, they would bloom into an incident that would leave the entire room stunned. The hearing reconvened, with Judge Friedman methodically reviewing the parties' arguments. She asked James a few pointed questions regarding the discrepancy in financial disclosures, some of which alluded to expensive gifts, suspiciously absent from his official statements. James stumbled through half-truths. Delilah, from her seat behind him, fidgeted uneasily. She shot daggers at Lucy whenever the conversation veered toward James's expenditures on an unnamed individual. Lucy struggled to maintain her composure, her hands clasped protectively over her belly, trembling with a mix of anger, stress, and maternal instinct. She forced herself to breathe evenly, to remind herself that she was here to protect her child's future. Judge Friedman closed a folder with a decisive snap. "I'd like to make a preliminary ruling on spousal support, pending further depositions." The next words could determine Lucy's immediate financial stability. For Delilah, they might represent the next step in losing or retaining her golden goose. Before Friedman could continue, Delilah stood an absolute breach of courtroom decorum. "Your Honor," she said, in a tone that was half desperation, half bravado, "I think you deserve to know the truth about Lucy Harrington, about her mental state." Gasps erupted from the gallery. Even the bailiff took a step forward, arms crossing, ready to escort Delilah back to her seat. Judge Friedman's gavel slammed. "Sit down. You're not a party to this hearing. Another outburst and I'll hold you in contempt," she warned, eyes flashing with authority. But Delilah, either emboldened by her own indignation or high on adrenaline, ignored the order. "Lucy doesn't deserve a dime," she hissed, now pointing a manicured nail at the pregnant wife. "She's been emotionally manipulating James for years." Using this child as leverage to Friedman, banged the gavel again. "Order bailiff, remove Ms." That was when Lucy, driven to the breaking point, rose from her seat. "How dare you?" she said, her voice shaking. She gripped the edge of the table for balance. "I've loved James since before he was showering women like you with gifts." I was with him when she never finished. In a blinding, shocking moment, Delilah lunged forward, crossing the short distance between them. Her open palm cracked across Lucy's cheek. The impact was so sharp that the entire courtroom seemed to gasp in unison. The pregnant wife staggered backward, nearly losing her balance, instinctively pressing a hand to her face. Chaos broke out instantly. Catherine shrieked. Bailiffs and lawyers scrambled. Cameras in the gallery, despite the judge's no-camera policy, clicked in a frenzy. Journalists who were present to gather notes scribbled furiously, practically salivating at the front-page material unfolding before them. Judge Friedman's voice bellowed above the din. "Bailiffs, secure this room. Restrain that woman." She pointed at Delilah, who stood chest-heaving, a victorious or perhaps shocked expression plastered on her face. Lucy's tearful eyes locked on Delilah, a ripple of protective rage coursing through her. Her cheek burned from the assault, but her hands instinctively cradled her abdomen, terrified that the shock might harm her unborn baby. Before anyone could drag Delilah away, James vaulted out of his chair. His face had turned a ghastly pale. With trembling fingers, he pointed at Delilah and roared, "Enough! Don't you ever touch my wife again!" His words rang out like thunder. Everyone froze as if the scene had turned to stone. James's authority, a hallmark of his business dealings, surfaced in a visceral, terrifying way. Delilah's bravado appeared to evaporate under his glare. For a fleeting moment, Lucy glimpsed the James she once knew, the protective partner who had pledged to love and cherish her. But the entire tableau reeked of tragedy. Lucy was battered, Delilah was raging, and James was stuck in between a once powerful man, undone by his own choices. With adrenaline still pounding in everyone's veins, bailiffs finally subdued Delilah. Judge Friedman ordered the courtroom cleared, reporters ushered out. In an instant, the hearing devolved into chaos, overshadowed by the scandalous physical assault. And the city would soon buzz with the news, "Mistress slaps pregnant wife in court." But then the millionaire stands and points at her. The tabloids would feast on this event for days, twisting every angle, while Lucy James and Delilah faced the aftermath of a line crossed, one that might never be uncrossed. The courtroom melee triggered a domino effect of repercussions. Within hours, headlines blared across major outlets and social media. Harrington Court brawl, mistress attacks pregnant wife. News anchors on local stations dissected every second of the incident, and the footage, though partially banned from official recording, somehow leaked online via a smartphone video. The internet erupted with commentary. Most were sympathetic to Lucy, condemning Delilah's brazen violence. Others questioned James's moral character, and a smaller faction, likely spurred by Delilah's own influencer fans, argued Lucy must have provoked her. Judge Friedman, outraged by the disruption to her courtroom, scheduled a follow-up hearing. This time it would not just be a divorce proceeding, but also a contempt of court hearing for Delilah Moore. She might face criminal charges for assault. The seriousness of the situation left James in a panic. No matter how he tried to distance himself from Delilah's actions, the public associated her with him. Investors in his shipping empire expressed concern. The board members murmured in private about a potential scandal that could harm the company's reputation and share value. Some demanded James relinquish certain powers until the situation stabilized. In her penthouse, Delilah tried to spin the narrative to her advantage. She posted an emotional video to her social media accounts, her mascara artfully smudged, claiming she had been pushed to her limits by Lucy's alleged verbal harassment. Many viewers saw through the facade. Major media outlets invited her for exclusive interviews, but after conferring with her attorney, she declined, aware that any public statement could further incriminate her. Yet she continued to direct message influential gossip bloggers, feeding them half-truths and personal claims that Lucy was a gold digger, an unfit mother hoping to tarnish Lucy's credibility. Lucy, meanwhile, found herself suffering panic attacks. Every day brought fresh harassment from reporters camping outside her penthouse lobby. She worried endlessly about her unborn child's well-being. The stress manifested in sleepless nights, her appetite vanished, and Catherine Miller tried her best to provide maternal comfort. Doctors warned Lucy to avoid stress for the baby's sake. But how to avoid stress? When the entire world buzzed about her life's most intimate betrayals. Sandra Blaine guided Lucy through the legal labyrinth. They filed restraining orders against Delilah, demanded immediate spousal support, and emphasized Lucy's need for a stable environment in her pregnancy. Judge Friedman, incensed by Delilah's courtroom violence, granted Lucy protective orders, effectively barring Delilah from contacting her or getting within 500 feet without risking arrest. The preliminary hearing for the divorce was postponed until after the assault case concluded. Lucy's face, bruised in spirit, if not physically marked, became emblematic of a woman scorned, yet determined to stand up for herself. Behind the scenes, James wrestled with deep guilt. He tried visiting Lucy's penthouse to apologize, to beg forgiveness, to show some form of contrition. Lucy refused to see him. Sandra's stance was simple. Until the hearing is over, any contact must go through me. Catherine added her voice. You've done enough damage. Leave her alone. James complied, but felt strangely relieved when Lucy refused him. He was forced to confront the emptiness in his life that no amount of luxury could fill. Late at night, he found himself alone in the Harrington Mansion library, staring at old photo albums from simpler times. He recalled Lucy's radiant smile, remembered how she'd gently dab away his worry lines after a stressful day. The affair with Delilah now seemed like a hollow pursuit of excitement. He realized, perhaps too late, that what he truly craved was Lucy's unwavering warmth, a warmth he might never feel again. As for Delilah, the circle of her once loyal fans started to shrink. Sponsors pulled out of deals and a few brand collaborations paused their contracts until her legal issues were resolved. She raged privately, hurling crystal vases and designer shoes across her penthouse suite. In a moment of desperation, she called James's phone repeatedly. He stopped answering. She turned to her attorneys, demanding a strategy that would keep her out of jail and salvage her image. Still, no legal maneuver could fully erase the public spectacle of her slapping a pregnant woman in open court. A swirling sense of destiny hovered in the air. Another showdown loomed, and each character braced for a new confrontation, one that could either redeem them or seal their fate forever. 2 weeks later, Judge Friedman convened a closed hearing to address the assault charges and to move forward with Lucy's divorce proceedings. The fiasco had garnered too much media frenzy, so Friedman insisted on minimal attendance, the parties their attorneys, and a small security detail. In an unusual step, Friedman granted Lucy's request to have her mother Catherine present for emotional support, given Lucy's advanced pregnancy and the trauma inflicted upon her. The tension was thick enough to cut with a knife as Lucy and her team entered the courtroom. James was already there, shoulders slumped. Delilah sat a few rows behind him, her usual flare, subdued eyes darting anxiously. She wore a simple dress, presumably to appear more demure in the judge's eyes. Her lawyer, Ellis McKnight, whispered instructions, reminding her to maintain composure. When Friedman took the bench, the gavel's echo resounded. She wasted no time. "Moore, you stand accused of contempt of court and assault. How do you plead?" Delilah's attorney quickly interjected, "Not guilty, Your Honor." She acted in self-defense after being antagonized. Lucy's jaw tightened. Self-defense. She could hardly believe the audacity of that claim. Friedman's glare told Delilah to tread carefully. Turning to Lucy's attorney, Friedman asked if Lucy wanted to press criminal charges. Sandra Blaine glanced at Lucy for confirmation. Though Lucy loathed Delilah, she chose not to push for the harshest route. "We'd prefer a plea agreement," Lucy whispered to Sandra. She had no desire for a grueling criminal trial. Her main concern was ensuring safety for herself and her child. Blaine relayed Lucy's stance, and Friedman nodded. "I'll grant you that," Friedman said, "but Ms. Moore's conduct remains abhorrent." She fixed Delilah with a stern stare. "I'll not tolerate violence in my courtroom. Depending on your actions today, I'll decide whether further penalties are warranted." Friedman then shifted focus to the divorce settlement. Using the evidence Lucy had provided, she was inclined to grant Lucy a substantial sum for spousal support and future child care. James's indiscretions loomed large in Friedman's mind. She indicated that Lucy deserved more than standard alimony given James's empire and her need to raise his child. Delilah's outburst had done Lucy's case a strange favor by evoking sympathy and disgust over James's tangled affair. Gerald Peters sighed, mustering a stoic defense on James's behalf. He tried to argue that Lucy was capable of earning her own living, pointing out her budding design consultancy. Friedman silenced him with a single upraised hand. "A child is involved, Mr. Peters. This is non-negotiable." Then came the moment James had dreaded. Friedman demanded to know whether he intended to continue supporting Delilah financially or otherwise after the divorce. The question hung in the silent courtroom. Eyes flickered between James and Delilah. Lucy's heartbeat thundered in her ears, unsure what he would say. James inhaled a shaky breath. "Your Honor, I intend to end our arrangement permanently. I recognize that this affair caused harm to my wife and unborn child. I have no intention of further entanglements." The words fell like stones in the hushed space. A flicker of hurt crossed Delilah's face, quickly replaced by rage. At Friedman's instruction, James produced a formal statement terminating any financial assistance to Delilah beyond an agreed-upon lump sum to cover her attorney fees and help her relocate. Delilah's attorney tried to negotiate, but Friedman's patience wore thin. "Ms. Moore is lucky not to be jailed," Friedman intoned. "She assaulted a pregnant woman in my courtroom. One more word on the matter, and I'll have you all removed." Lucy's eyes filled with tears of relief. She wasn't gloating. She was just exhausted. She realized that for better or worse, James had made a definitive choice. Friedman then finalized a tentative divorce decree awarding Lucy adequate spousal and child support, pending a full financial review. The child would remain under Lucy's sole custody once born, though James would have visitation rights if he met certain conditions. As Friedman pounded the gavel to close the session, Delilah bolted from her seat, ignoring the hush that fell. She glared at James, her eyes brimming with unspent fury, and then whipped around to face Lucy. It looked like she might lunge again, but the security detail blocked her path. Her voice, trembling, spat out, "You'll regret this." With that, she stormed out, her heels echoing down the corridor, leaving James staring hollowly after her. Friedman, exhaling, said, "We're done here. Good luck to all parties." The weight of the judge's words hung in the air. In the aftermath, Lucy felt a surge of emotion, relief, sadness, even a pang of pity for the destructive path Delilah had chosen. But the drama was far from over. Even with a settlement in hand, Lucy sensed that her future would be complicated by the scars of betrayal. Yet for her child, she vowed to stand strong, no matter what storms might come next. The weeks following the closed courtroom hearing felt like the gentle hush after a violent storm. For Lucy Harrington, the silence wasn't empty, it was sacred. Though the tabloids still buzzed with sensational headlines, the intensity of the spotlight had dimmed slightly, thanks to Judge Friedman's firm restrictions and the temporary restraining order filed against Delilah Moore. For the first time in what felt like years, Lucy could breathe. With Catherine's ever-present support, Lucy poured herself into preparing for the final stages of her pregnancy. She met regularly with Dr. Eliza Hartman, a renowned obstetrician specializing in high-risk and high-stress pregnancies. Dr. Hartman, calm and steady, reassured Lucy that she was doing everything right and that stress management, though difficult, was just as vital as nutrition or rest. Lucy began incorporating long walks, prenatal yoga, and journaling into her routine. She clung to every kick, every flutter inside her belly. Like a silent promise, something beautiful was coming. Something worth every ounce of pain she had endured. Meanwhile, the storm James had sown swept through his own life like wildfire. Though he managed to stay on the board of Harrington Global, the board of directors demanded he step down as CEO, citing a need to preserve public trust and corporate integrity. His replacement, a longtime COO named Meredith Lane, assumed leadership to stabilize investor confidence. James, stripped of his title and the illusion of invulnerability, retreated from public view and began the painful work of reflection. He wrote Lucy letters, long, soul-bearing letters. In them, he admitted fault, recounted the shame he felt for succumbing to vanity and thrill, and expressed a desire to be a better man and father. Lucy read them, often late at night, sitting by the nursery window, with a hand resting gently on her belly. Sometimes she cried. Sometimes she tore the letters in half, but mostly she said nothing. Healing would take time, and she wasn't ready to hand out forgiveness like it was owed. As for Delilah, she disappeared. No more red carpets, no Instagram selfies in penthouses or with designer handbags. Whispers in the city suggested she fled to Los Angeles, trying to reboot her brand in smaller influencer circles. The occasional filtered posts that reappeared weeks later were far from her former glamour. She was now seen posing with lesser-known brands, hawking skincare lines and dietary teas, often met with snide comments questioning her relevance. Sponsors pulled out. Endorsement deals evaporated. Her circle of friends thinned. The once rising socialite had been knocked from her pedestal, and not even the most artful PR spin could resurrect her fallen star. Back in Roslyn Heights, Lucy found solace in the familiar. She spent most of her days in the Miller home, where Catherine brewed calming teas and played soft classical music through the speakers. Lucy transformed the guest room into a nursery painted in soothing pastels, mint green and soft pink, with hand-picked stencils of stars and clouds. Each evening she'd sit in the rocking chair by the crib, rubbing her belly, reading children's books aloud, creating a world of warmth for the little girl who would soon arrive. Then one afternoon, A knock echoed through the modest house. The caretaker opened the door, his expression unreadable. "Mrs. Harrington? It's James. He's here." Lucy looked up from the baby mobile she'd been assembling. A silence passed between her and Catherine, who instinctively stood up, ready to shield her daughter. But Lucy held up a hand. "I'll speak to him." James stood on the porch, an image of humility. Gone was the tailored bravado. In its place was a man subdued by the weight of his own mistakes. He held a trembling bouquet of white lilies, the same kind that had adorned their table the night he proposed. The petals fluttered slightly in the spring breeze. "I'm sorry for just showing up," he said, voice thick. "I know I've lost any right to expect kindness. I just wanted to make sure you were okay." Lucy's heart stirred, not with forgiveness, not yet, but with memory. She opened the door a little wider and stepped aside. They sat in the living room, where so many conversations had once centered around hope and dreams. Now the air was heavy with everything left unsaid. "I've set up a fund," James said carefully. "Separate from the settlement. I wanted to make sure you and the baby had everything you need, whether or not I'm involved." Lucy stared into the fireless hearth. "That's generous," she said, her tone unreadable. James continued, faltering. "I know I can't undo what I've done, but if there's any chance, any way I can be part of our daughter's life, I'll do whatever it takes." Lucy was quiet. She thought of Delilah, of the slap of the courtroom, of every lie that had chipped away at her trust. But she also thought of the baby's heartbeat and the longing in her child's future for a father. "I don't know what the future holds," she finally said. "But I know she deserves a father who shows up. Not just when it's easy, not for appearances, but every day." James nodded almost reverently. "I will. I promise." With Catherine's help and Sandra Blaine's legal counsel, Lucy drafted strict co-parenting terms, supervised visits at first counseling sessions, and total disconnection from Delilah Moore in every capacity. James signed the agreement without protest. Then, on a crisp April morning after 10 hours of labor, Lucy gave birth to a healthy baby girl. They named her Joy. Holding her for the first time, Lucy wept not from pain, but from relief. Joy's tiny fingers curled around her thumb, like a whisper from the universe. Everything she had endured, every betrayal, every courtroom humiliation had led to this one radiant moment. James arrived at the hospital hours later. He stood outside the room for a long time before entering. When he finally stepped in, Lucy was cradling Joy against her chest, eyes closed, humming softly. James paused in the doorway, his eyes glistening. "May I?" he asked. Lucy studied him. He looked smaller, human. She nodded. James gently picked up Joy, holding her like she was made of glass. "She's perfect," he whispered. "She is," Lucy said. "And she's mine." He nodded in understanding. "And I'll earn the right to be part of her life, day by day." The tabloids would eventually catch wind of the birth. They printed predictable headlines. "Harrington heir, born in wake of courtroom scandal." But Lucy didn't care. She wasn't living for the headlines anymore. She was living for joy. Outside, the cherry blossoms in Roslyn Heights had begun to bloom. Spring had arrived not in grand gestures, but in small mercies. A baby's cry, a mother's heartbeat, and a new chapter blooming slowly, beautifully. For Lucy, this wasn't a return to fairy tales. It was the beginning of a new kind of story, one forged in truth, pain, resilience, and unconditional love. A story where she and only she held the pen. As dawn broke on a new chapter for Lucy and her baby girl, the echoes of that fateful courtroom slap gradually faded, but its lessons remained. Sometimes love is tested in the most brutal ways, and not all hearts that break can be mended. James, chastened and humbled, resolved to earn trust anew step by careful step. Delilah, once a rising star, became an uneasy reminder that ambition without compassion inevitably spirals into self-destruction. And Lucy, her heart scarred yet steadfast, discovered a wellspring of inner strength she never knew she had. If this story touched you, share it with someone who needs a reminder that life can hand us storms, but we carry the power to find the rainbow afterward. Like, subscribe, and spread this story so others may witness the resilience of a mother's love and the moral reckoning that awaits those who underestimate it. Your support keeps these real-life dramas alive.